I hope, having listened to this whole thing, you understand that it was like, it had to be this way. It had to be this way.
Hello again, this is Hellcry. On March 20th, Hardcore Gaming 101 released a podcast in their series of ranking 47,000 video games. That day's topic was Y2K, a postmodern RPG. Inside the podcast are lies, slander, misrepresentation, and direct insults to the creators of Y2K. And it also has some opinions on the way that the game is. But I don't care about their opinions. I care about all of those other things. And because they are a gaming publication, I feel like it's very important to call them out on what they've done. So that's what we're going to do today. I'll show you a few clips and discuss how things in here are misrepresentations, or even show you direct insults that they say towards the creators of the game, and how this is entirely unprofessional for a podcast based on gaming to do towards an independent team of 2 people. This would also be pretty gross to do to a AAA developer as well, but it's even worse that they're punching down on small-time indie developers. There's also some unsubstantiated claims in there that I also want to point out that are actually impossible to look up. Hardcore Gaming 101 is a news and interview style publication for gaming. They do interviews with developers, they review games, they talk on the latest news. Just about what you would expect. Our protagonists today are Cal.
I'm doing my best here, okay?
One of the hosts of the podcast and a game maker, and Gufu.
No, because I didn't do any research. You're the research boy.
Who I don't know how to search his name because I don't know how to spell it, to be honest. There's like a million different ways to spell it, and it is just ridiculous. So I couldn't find a picture of him and anything about him specifically, but he is going to be the person that says the most worst things.
If you're a yicker, you should definitely stop listening now, because you are not going to be particularly happy in a very short while.
I find this statement quite funny because before it, they already immediately said things that are untrue. But secondarily, it seems like a way to get people that are fans of the game to ignore the fact that they are going to be insulting and lying about the creators of the game. Don't look at this. We're going to be talking negatively about this. Cal, I'll let you know. If you don't like it, I don't care. And honestly, I find it pretentious that you think I care about your opinions. Tell me why I should care about your opinions. I'm called the world's biggest yick defender by multiple people, but I don't care about people's opinions. I only care when they are spreading lies, misinformation, slandering the developers of the game, and amongst other things, because this is a terrible precedent for a gaming publication to willingly slander people. This is frankly unacceptable.
They have to go to a lot of very not particularly reputable podcasts to promote their game.
I'm not exactly going to go in order of everything that they said. I'm going to put the most important things at the front, and then we'll get to more pedantic, weird things that I have comments on towards the end. But here, the developers of Y2K go on less reputable podcasts. The most infamous appearance of this is Andrew Allenson on The Dick Show. The Dick Show is a widely successful comedy podcast about coming in, complaining about something. And other than that, they mentioned later Mother Forever, a Mother fan podcast. And there's other podcasts that they make appearances on, mostly because they know somebody on the podcast. This is important to point out because they misrepresent what Andrew Allenson says on all of these podcasts to be in the worst light possible. And we'll start with Mother Forever because it's pretty egregious.
But then it becomes a thing about how mother fans are weirdo freaks.
You know, like
Because they said that, remember?
yeah, I mean
After
that's
they're making their mother fan game.
on a mother fan game like podcast show actually, which
What was your first impression of the community overall?
We were both lurkers on Starman. We read it, but we never posted. I think we were too shy to do that because the community was so established when we found it. It was kind of daunting in a way.
Yeah.
My impressions were positive, but I think that I was really interested in how obsessive people got with artifacts of their childhood and how they organized their whole life around it.
Yeah.
And how it kind of becomes like a religion in a way, and it becomes like the primary driving factor for meaning in their life. And that was something that when I was a kid and I looked at it, it just made sense to me. But then like there came a certain point where it seemed maybe a little unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I actually think that that's really what Y2K is kind of about. It's about that type of fan, someone who's stuck in the past for pop culture artifacts from their youth,
Right.
where they hold that up as the utmost meaning and they chase it and they filter everything that they want and think about through this one thing, and it becomes a sort of arrested development. Now, this is not to say that this is the entire mother community and that there isn't a healthy way to do that, but that was really interesting to me, and that definitely, I think, inspired the game's story.
Yeah, that's such an elegant way to put it, and people like that exist, I think, in almost every fandom, I think.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like it's pretty clear that they're talking about an aspect of fan culture that exists, again, not only in the mother fandom, but overall, where they can't let something go, and not calling them weirdo freaks for it, just commenting on how that's inspiring when you're wanting to create a character that doesn't grow, that needs to grow, but doesn't. Now, as usual, they seem to misunderstand the games aren't art quote that every person in the world shares, that
if this game is the art of games, then Roger Ebert is right.
The Allardsons certainly think it is. I
You're
thought
getting
video
split.
games could be art, but I guess I was wrong.
Thing I prepared about this.
Yeah.
Okay. My mistake was thinking that video games are art.
here in this clip, Andrew Allenson is speaking somewhat sarcastically. He's expressing a frustration towards the idea that all video games must be fun, and by doing that, they cannot be art, because art isn't objectively always fun. This has been misunderstood by a lot of people, and you could chalk this up as just a misunderstanding and move on, but with how much of this is maliciously taking things that he's said and rephrasing them to mean the worst possible version of it, it doesn't feel like it's just a misunderstanding. If me saying what this was about isn't good enough, here it is in Andrew's own words.
Okay, so I never said video. Okay, when I went on the Dick Show podcast, the format of the show is what makes you rage. What is the thing that makes you angry? So I needed like a good thing to bring, so I fit the format of the show. I wanted to be good content for the show. And the thing that made me rage was a particular tweet that said that video games are about fun, that they have to be fun, and an unlikable protagonist is inherently not fun. So it's a bad game design to make an unlikable protagonist and to make things that are intentionally tedious. So what I was trying to say on the Dick Show, flippantly and sarcastically and trying to be entertaining for the show, was if you think that video games have to be entertaining at all times and they have to just make you smile and grin like you're playing pachinko or something, then video games are not art. They're stuck in the realm of toys. But of course I don't believe that. I think video games are art, which was the whole point I was trying to make.
Yeah, see, that's how sarcasm works.
Yeah. And like if you look at what I said and you look at the context, it'll be pretty clear that I never said video games were not art. That the person who upset me with their tweet and made me a rage was the person who was saying video games are not art.
Right, that was a fun one. Someone just transcribed like a tiny section of what you said, and they mark it as sarcasm.
Following this, They say in other podcasts that they're constantly retconning what they feel about the game.
If you listen to what they've said over the years, you just have to accept what they've said, because often they've changed what they've said, which is weird. I would not expect my goals for the thing that I already made to change, or my references, not all of my references, but my sentiments about it. I wouldn't expect those to change much, but they do, which is, they don't necessarily change to completely contradictory things, but it definitely went from being a very...
Sometimes they do.
And just as a form of reference here, let's use the example of the mother fan thing that Gufu brought up.
I actually think that that's really what Y2K is kind of about. It's about that type of fan, someone who's stuck in the past for, pop culture artifacts from their youth,
Right.
where they hold that up as the utmost meaning and they chase it and they filter everything that they want and think about through this one thing, and it becomes a sort of arrested development.
Gufu here implies that this was something that was later said. However, if we look at the Dick Show interview, which takes place years before Mother Forever, Andrew Allinson says this in it.
And explore the types of people who sort of put off growing up and getting real jobs, and all they do is play internet detective all day.
Which is extremely similar to the same sentiment that he shares on the Mother Forever podcast, that the game is about a person who is experiencing arrested development and is obsessing over the past. I want to show you one more clip from the Dick Show before I move on.
And I'm just going to say, though, this is not to say that my game is above any criticism. I know my game has problems. It's not perfect.
Yizbird might be funded by Singaporean billionaires? Maybe? That's a weird one. I was a completely different research hole I went on for that. That was strange. Feel free to find out about Yizbird, but...
I'm not even going to pretend that I did a whole lot of research to determine this, but I do think it's very odd to say, yes, this is a thing, go look for it, and yet nothing pops up in a Google search. I also don't know how this is relevant at all to Y2K. If Singaporean billionaires invest in a company that is publishing video games, what does that have to do with your thing about a video game? Why is this said as if it's a negative thing relative to the video game? It seems really weird to bring up, and really weird that it's unverifiable.
Since the newer versions will edit Alex's dialogue, and Alex is the main character.
While this is really innocuous, in reality, it's a lot more problematic than it seems on its surface. There are no script changes in Y2K IV. That is just a fact. Hi, I playtested IV, I can tell you that. But also, the reason that this ends up being somewhat problematic is they have no information on this. They do not know if there is or is not any script changes. But when this podcast and a lot of other conversation about the game hinges on, these people don't understand what makes their game likable, and now they're changing it to be less likable, this becomes a malicious statement to say that something that is absolutely not happening is happening. No, there is no script changes.
Something. They can't really tell you what it means other than it means that it's postmodern.
Primarily here, he's talking about fans of the game talking about it. But later on, he says that the creators can't also define postmodern. So, here's a definition from Andrew Allinson that I'll read aloud real quickly. A movement of literary criticism and philosophy concerned with skepticism towards grand narrative and how they shape our culture, reality, and expression. And if that's not enough, allow me to, as I've done before, give my own definition for what postmodernism is. Postmodernism was a philosophical movement based around questioning meta-narratives. A meta-narrative being something like the hero's journey, a story about a story, a narrative about a narrative. Postmodernism seeks to question the meta-narratives, not only the meta-narratives within stories, but the meta-narratives around our life and how those influence us. In postmodern storytelling, you'll often have a unreliable narrator who has adopted meta-narratives and tells you specific meta-narratives about the way his world works in order to get you to believe certain things. And it's your job as the audience member, as the postmodernist, to dissect those, question them. That's what it means to be postmodern. Let's hear what Gufu has to say about postmodernism.
And when a supporter of this game comes up and tells you, well, you have to view it in a postmodern context. You, as an individual, were brought up and naturally view things in the postmodern context. That is your natural, critical method of viewing media, is postmodernism.
The issue here isn't that we all exist in a postmodern way of viewing life. That's true. The issue is when you look at a story, and as they demonstrate throughout this podcast, taking everything at face value, they aren't critically thinking and dissecting the meta-narratives presented. Instead, they are directly accepting them, as is. And instead of questioning any of the narratives told to you into the game, they question the meta-narratives given by the author in order to insult him. This isn't reading the story in postmodernism. This is actually just being an asshole. You're being obtuse about the way that you perceive things and then are misrepresenting what it means to look at a story with a postmodern lens.
It's going to be based on the real death of a real person, which probably that they based on a real person. Is it Alan Lamb? I believe her last name was Lamb, and she tragically died in a psychotic break incident. It's a very, very real thing that really happened. This is actually important for the game.
Alan Lamb was a South African-born English cricketer. Okay, I'm kidding. Misspeaking about the name of the victim aside, saying that the game is based on her death is extremely disingenuous. This is a common talking point, but the issue is that the character, Semi Pak, actually has very little in common with Elisa Lam, other than that there's internet elevator footage of them, and that they're Asian. But the point of having a character similar to this and having the main character be obsessed with them is to criticize the people that got obsessed with this case, as pointed out in that Dick Show clip I showed earlier.
And explore the types of people who sort of put off growing up and getting real jobs, and all they do is play internet detective all day.
So, what I find odd about this is because this person can't even remember the name of the person who died and is using this as a talking point to speak illy on this game, I wonder how much they care. This seems entirely performative and, obviously, as I just demonstrated, misrepresentative of how much was actually used in the game.
That we have finished this game. Like, it's impossible for us not to have. So
I got both endings.
Did you look up the third ending online, which you can only see online? There's a third ending that was like a fake. You can find it on the internet ending that was probably uploaded by the developer under like a fake alias, which is. And they later deleted it as well. So, you know, there's like an ARG element to Yick that no one cares about except like the Yickers. And
amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.
It's provably true that all of the files for both endings exist within the game and are fully playable from the beginning to end. Accessing them is a different story. It's also untrue that that's a developer account. The developers have no idea whose account that is, though they assume that it is someone related to somebody that used to be staff on the game. And they have a history of people close to their project saying more than they should. There's even posts in the Y2K Discord about a potential sequel to Y2K. And somebody that isn't either of the developers sharing images of it. The thing that's wild about this is how verifiably it's untrue. This is a theory brought on by YouTubers in order to... I have no idea. I have no idea what the purpose is for this grand lie everybody keeps saying about the third ending. Just so they don't feel bad that they haven't figured out the mystery? I seriously don't get it. It's just a secret that hasn't been found. And some people like to say, well, it's been like 5 years since the game's come out. Yeah, it took 15 years for the Futurama secret to be found, and multiple years for others, for many more popular games. It verifiably exists, and things have been changed about it in the other one through the 1.25 update, where combat had elements added to them, where both bosses on each were given elements, something not present in earlier versions, and something that would have to be done manually, not something that would be done automatically. So I ask you, if there's these two boss fights in this game that are inaccessible and have been cut, and the whole point is that you're not able to get to them, what is the point of updating their elemental affinities? There would be none. That's because it's part of the secret that you have failed to uncover. Therefore, you did not finish the game. I'm sorry to tell you. Now we've got the major things out of the way. I'm going to kind of rapid fire through some of these.
Unlike Two Brothers, their previous game, which is not available on Steam anymore, because they probably are going to remake it eventually. They've been promising that for, I think, literally a decade.
No, it's not going to come out because some people are dead set on keeping it released.
I'm telling you now, I have plans that I cannot share with you right now because the haters will sabotage me. I have plans that I cannot share with you right now because the haters will sabotage me. I have plans that I will not share right now because the haters will sabotage me. But I got some stuff in the works.
There's been a lot of changes to Yik. And sometimes you didn't even know it happened. Like, if you look at, and this is going to be, Cal's going to explain this more. If you look at YouTube videos, that game that you're watching is not the game that you'd be playing if you bought it right now and started playing it.
They say that there's been a lot of changes to Yik. Well, there was one major update. Before 1.25, there was a lot of smaller changes to Yik, mostly bug fixes. This was patches 1.03 to 1.07. When 1.25 came around, this is a major patch, kind of working to see what they can actually do when it comes to 1.5, the actual major patch. The lack of research here and the idea that there's so many different versions of the game that exist, it's a little bit misleading. There are like two major versions that exist outside of pre-release. There's 1.0, 1.25. And then eventually there will be 1.5.
I don't know who demanded that they make this change, but it was literally I believe it was literally called Y2K, like actually Y, the number 2, and K. So
well, the copyright holders to Y2K did.
Here is a screenshot of the title screen of the prototype for Y2K. This was made in 2014 before they got published by Yeezbreed.
And, I think, if they did not expect people to call it Yik, it shows an immediate and very clear lack of fundamental understanding of the human condition.
The developers also have called it Yik in the past. They are not unaware of this. This is a stupid claim that they aren't aware that people would call it Yik. And the primary reason as to why changing it to Y Roman numeral 2 K is that is a more searchable name. It's more unique than Y number 2K. It's less generic. It's more memorable. Obviously, as you all keep calling it Yik, it fucking worked. It fucking worked. And then you guys are too stupid to realize that it worked. So you decide, oh, well, they're pretty stupid if they don't realize this. No. They got the result that they wanted from you. You lost. Stop trying to act smarter than you are.
But that's because the game was accused of plagiarism, which is not... it's one of these, I gotta mention this because it's one of the reasons that people hate Yick or something. And when you actually
Yeah,
look at that specific thing, I'm like, no, nah, that's not
no,
it. That's not
it would, yeah. It's here's the thing with it. There's no malicious intent in that moment. There is absolutely none.
Yeah.
Was it a clunky reference? Yes.
Oh yeah.
Would I have done it? No.
Goofoo might have not done it, but you know who would have done it? That's right. Acclaimed independent developer Toby Fox. There's an example of him doing it in Undertale. Is it clunky? Is it incompetent there? This is a talking point you're using against Y2K, but Undertale's in your top 20. And it does the same exact fucking thing.
Because I would have sat there and said, you can't do this. But was there malicious intent? Was it plagiarism? Were they trying to steal his words for their own benefit? No, it was a thing where they put it out and there was like, if you read that book, you'll get this. Especially since it has nothing to do with anything. It's which is also a point in their favor, oddly enough, is that it just comes out of nowhere, it matches nothing, has nothing to do with a goddamn thing. Now that just shows you their incompetence. But that is stealing someone else's work in a more literal way. Once again, no malicious intent, which I think is important when grilling these people. No malicious intent on this. This is just incompetence.
In the middle of development, they basically changed the entire game. I find the timing and the way that the development just kind of weirdly segs very extremely. And there is some stuff about I think the developer decided that they didn't like the kind of game that they were making in the middle of developing it. But basically, Yick was supposed to. And I think this is reasonable to say it was supposed to be like this because a lot of the press material and very early things that they say about the game before the shift in where the game is going, it was basically much more genuinely it's just a goofy Mother Earthboundy kind of game. That's the narrative. It's just going to be silly. It's going to be.
The script for Y2K was written at the beginning of development because the development timeline was a single year, and the lines of dialogue needed to be recorded and processed for how heavy a JRPG would be. This means that no, it did not change mid-development. A lot of articles about Y2K's development are very misleading. The ending wasn't changed. There was one line of dialogue that was changed in the ending. There's one article that says about 60% or something like that of the game was completely rebuilt from the ground up. This is true, and you can see this in the game itself if you go through the files enough. You can find that there was a completely different sewer, a completely different mount town, a completely different Essentia dungeon, and a completely different radio tower. As well as in pre-release things, you can see that the factory hotel was entirely different and that the main area, Frankton, was completely different. This is because these versions did not work with how the game was structured and needed to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. That is quite a lot of the game. But it is not that the game and their direction changed mid-development, as they are assessing here. This next clip, I'm going to play a segment from Andrew Allenson and then allow Goofoo to shove his foot into his own mouth. I just hope his stomach can take it, and that when it comes out the other end, it doesn't hurt too much.
I've been doing game development since 2011.
You don't write a novel as the first thing you write. It might be the first thing you publish. That's not the first thing you write. Just the old... I don't really subscribe to this theory because I subscribe to the general idea behind it, but not the strict rules of the 10. It was 10,000 hours to become a master at something.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So everyone's always done 10,000 hours. I don't actually subscribe to that
it's
theory.
It's not true, Goofoo. Some people do 1,000 and they're perfect. It's not true.
But yeah, some people have certain skills, and everyone's different. But the point is that you have to work at something to get good at it. And everyone does. No matter how uber talented you are. Mozart took and played piano all throughout his childhood. Doesn't matter that he was a prodigy. Mozart had to work and work and work and work and work to be what he was. And they're not doing that. They're just starting off. He had to do his scales constantly. Had to do it just because he was 1,000 times better than any other human being that may have ever lived. He still had to work and work and work and work and work. They just came in here and say, "I'm going to make a game," and they made a huge game rather than saying there, "I'm going to make a small game, and I'm going to write a small story that's contained and understandable. It's going to have a point. It's going to have a character. I'm going to learn how to write characters. I'm going to learn how to write scenery. I'm going to learn how to, mesh in illusions, and I'm going to throw symbols and imagery throughout it. And I'm going to learn these things through smaller works. Could be a page. It could be a paragraph. It could be, and just work your way up. Write a small little game. Make a small game." They refused. They made a 20-hour behemoth.
Actually made two, because Two Brothers is a huge game, and then they went ahead and made a second huge game, and both of them are not finished in a way that is good. They're
not. It's not finished. Y2K. They're going to tell you it's finished. It's unfinished.
Mm-hmm.
It is an unfinished game. It is an unfinished narrative. Well, there is no narrative because the narrative changes constantly because they don't know how to write. Because they don't write, and they didn't practice, and they didn't put time and effort or care into it. They just sat there and said, "It's postmodern. I read a Murakami novel once, and he's more postmodern than most people. And so that's what postmodernism is, because I don't understand what postmodernism is. And through that understanding of postmodernism, I'm going to create something that doesn't work because I'm not as smart and I'm not as talented, and I have not put the time and effort that these individuals have." They also read Infinite. One of the other things that they reference as an inspiration is Infinite Jest. So once again,
I've been doing game development since 2011.
There was more I wanted to talk about, but I am too tired and I have better things to do. There's a whole segment where they talk about the combat and how useless most of the skills are, and then list almost every skill as something useful that they used. There's a part where Gufu says that there's no point to the story, given his understanding of postmodernism earlier and his understanding of, I don't know that he has an understanding of anything. I don't think that you could get it. And while that's an insult towards you, you've insulted Andrew Allenson and Brian Allenson throughout this thing constantly. So if that upsets you, get the fuck over yourself. I'm going to leave it off with this clip.
They have to go to a lot of very not particularly reputable podcasts to promote their game. They really should be here, to be honest. Like, we're actually probably higher than the standard that they sunk to for some of their appearances. So